Welcome to Familiar Territory, an anime podcast hosted by two white dudes who've been friends for over 15 years. Here we talk about the history and influence of anime, as well as review anime new and old. So grab your talking cap and transform into some comfy clothes as we step into a familiar territory. My name is Grant.
And I'm Brantley. Heads up, spoilers on the way. Check the description, see if you're safe to listen. Today we're reviewing a story of a group of close friends who discovered the world around them isn't what it seems. Their memories stolen and reality changed, their carefree days come to an abrupt end, seeking the truth and fighting fate by using the very weapons of their oppressors. Let's talk about Kingdom Hearts 2. Now, Kingdom Hearts 2 was released in Japan in 2005, right at the tail end, and 2006 everywhere else in the world.
It's over!
Of course, we're not actually talking about Kingdom Hearts 2. Though, I do love the gut punch that is the Wikipedia article reading off, Kingdom Hearts 2 is the third game in the Kingdom Hearts series. That will never get old. How emblematic, really, of Kingdom Hearts, to just go ahead and plot that trajectory for them.
Oh, absolutely.
Grant, what are we actually reviewing today?
We're reviewing Yuki Yuna, the Washio Sumi no Shu chapter, as well as the Yusha no Sho chapter. Basically, season 2 of Yuki Yuna, but it's more like Pukey Yuna. Am I right?
Oh, yay! It's Pukey Yuna. Yuki Yuna is a Hero, the Washio Sumi chapter, is the prequel to Yuki Yuna is a Hero, and Yuki Yuna is a Hero, the Hero chapter, is the sequel to Yuki Yuna is a Hero. By their powers combined, 6 plus 6 makes 12, so we're calling that Season 2 of Yuki Yuna here. And that's what we're reviewing.
They also came out, like, next to each other. The
I think it's intentional.
Yeah, because the Washio Sumi no Sho episode came out, it finished airing November 11th, 2017, and the Hero chapter started November 25th, 2017. So, it was definitely intentional.
Yeah, the prequel had a recap episode and everything that kind of counts as their episode 7. That catches you up on Yuki Yuna is a Hero before Season 2 hits, so, hey, by the way, if you're just randomly dropping into this, and you haven't seen our review on Yuki Yuna is a Hero, then go check that out first. That'll give you an idea of whether or not you want to listen to this one.
Yeah.
Depending on, our tastes on Yuki Yuna. Spoilers, we don't care for it as much as other people do.
I really, really want to like Yuki Yuna. I really do.
I do too.
Like, The moments that they get right, I get really, like, bubbly and happy. I love some of the aesthetic choices they have for some of their characters. Some of their fight scene stuff's really cool. But it's like... It's like being... I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but I'm always terrible at analogies.
Well, it's okay. Yuki Yuna's terrible at a lot of things, so we're just kind of all humbling ourselves right now.
Yuki Yuna gets so much right, and then absolutely just disrespects itself almost immediately.
Yeah, and it can't hold itself together.
And I think that's my biggest problem with it. So... Let's just dive into the prequel. It's really bad. The prequel is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the idea of trying to focus on Togo or whatever else she has like 6 different names.
For this review, so normally her name is Washio Sumi. That was the character's original name, but in the original creation of Yuki Yuna is a Hero, the character is named Togo. So I'm going to say that we're going to call her Togo for consistency, even in the prequel when she's not called that name. So everyone's just going to have to be okay with that. So yeah, on the topic of Togo then.
Togo's kind of my biggest problem with Yuki Yuna. It's like everything about her character ruins the rest of Yuki Yuna for me.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it had to be just that, but I think I was a little excited to be like, oh, we're going to get some background characterization out of her. But they totally changed everything about her character for the prequel, where she just was not enjoyable at all.
Mm-hmm.
So let's, and then so the Washio Sumi no show, the Washio chapter, follows 3 girls instead of the original 5.
4.
Yeah. Well,
5.
if you don't count Karin.
Oh my god, I can't.
So it follows Togo, her friend Sanako, and then Gin. And it's really
Sonico?
weird.
No, that's a different anime.
No, what?
Sonoko.
Fuck off.
I'm making a Super Sonico joke. Don't ever look at Super Sonico. You'll cry and hurt yourself.
But it's like, so it follows these characters, and they're 11, and I cannot stress the fact that they are 11.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really weird because in the original Yuki Yuna, the hero club was kind of the secret society where becoming a hero, where you go fight the demonic monsters to protect the remnants of humanity, you're not supposed to know it. It's a secret. But for some reason, in the prequel, everybody knows about it.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't make sense, because the only person who forgets anything is Togo. But they still rewrote the rules of the Hero Club enough so that nobody remembers it in the original Yuki Yuna run. But what's even weirder about it is in the third one, they allure to the fact that their parents know about it as well. It doesn't connect. It doesn't make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's very disjointed from the original series. In my opinion, it's like, it feels almost completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about what happens in this season, unless you have anything to bring up before I start doing that.
Not particularly. I think, well, I guess here's this. I'm gonna gripe a lot in this review, despite the fact that there's, like, things I want to give Yuki Yuna credit for. So, here's my pretense to all this. All of my, like, bitching and whining about this show is going to be predicated on me having seen a lot of these effective things done elsewhere, and a little better even. So, like, as penance, right, I'm going to give a counter recommendation. So if you think you'd like the premise of Yuki Yuna, but you don't think you'd care for the execution, or you tried it and you didn't care for it, go try out Sleepless Domain. It's a webcomic made by Cube Watermelon, also known as Mary Cagle. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her last name right. But anyways, it's got, like, a similar balance of, like, the comedy, tragedy stuff. There's a lot of focus on mental health of the characters, who are in that. I think they're high schoolers. Or perhaps middle schoolers. Either way, they're in that same age range that Yuki Yuna sort of hits. And it does get into the more, like, systemic pressures and things like that. Like, it hits a lot of the same beats that Yuki Yuna does, but I think it does a whole lot better with it. So, and hey, it's a webcomic, so you can probably blaze through it. So there, that's me trying to put good faith back into the world and maybe, balance things out a little bit. I'm gonna let everybody know that I do like things that Yuki Yuna tries to do. I just don't like the way that Yuki Yuna does it, and especially not the prequels. So let's start there.
So once again, the character it is a prequel, and so it's like 2 years before the original series. So the characters are literally like children. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't change the fact that whenever Togo her transformation is still fucking terrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's still awful. It's awful.
Incredibly sexualized. I would say more so than the original series. Actually, they stepped it up.
I would agree. And so it follows kind of the same beats. They fight the monsters, they win. They fight the monsters, they win. There is a weirdly nonsensical filler episode that happens, that doesn't have anything to do with anything. And then it's like a skit based episode.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really weird because you're supposed to be kind of having this, like, grim, dark, super fantastical, dangerous thing going on. And it's just like, hey, let's see what our kids are doing when they're not fighting monsters. But you got 6 episodes, and it doesn't build them up anything. It doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is the 4th episode, in which you get a character death. Gin dies. She dies after you find out that she's just a good old person. Not bad. She's just great. And then they start the Mankai thing, which is from the first series, where instead of dying, you just lose parts of your body. And that's where you learn how Togo got like put in a wheelchair, and how Sonoko, how she got like royally fucked up in the first season. And then it ends with Togo getting her memories wiped, and it begins where the first season kind of started. It doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. I feel like what they're trying to go for is something that's bittersweet, at least by the end, and it doesn't feel like that. Because they have to start at like they have to start flat with Yuki Yuna season 1, and so what you get instead are these like peaks and valleys of like comedy and tragedy. They don't like slowly ramp up into one another in any direction. And so by the end, for example, like after we get all of this tragedy and everything, we just essentially bam, oh, here's Togo meeting with Yuna, and it's sweet. And it's like, wow, okay. Because now Togo doesn't have her memories, and we're just getting this event, there is no like sadness to it. There is no history that's being shared here. Like in a dramatic sense, like, we as the viewer can kind of sense that, but they can't really play that off in the show because of the plot scenario they've created and how they act it. So it's just kind of awkward all the time. It feels like the show is lurching back and forth between these like happy or sweet moments and then these, moments of despair and disgust. I don't know.
But it doesn't do it in a way that totally makes sense. It's like, it's not happy then dark, or dark then happy then dark. It's like dark then happy then dark, and then immediately heel turns into a joke, and then cry. It's like Whiplash. And
yeah.
We kind of have a pretty big problem with shows doing that. Where they don't understand like how to write nuance or tone. And Yuki Yuna's really, really bad. And it's not necessarily because I think that Yuki Yuna is bad all the time. The ideas they have for the slice of life elements could be fun. Like, I actually think the way they did it in the original series isn't half bad, where you do have like a 2-episode slice of life thing to kind of wind down, and then it ramps back up.
Mm-hmm. It's a long enough fake out that it actually like has an impact.
Yeah. But when you only have 6 episodes to do it, and you're coming up right before you murder one of your characters, and then immediately the next episode is also goofy, it really doesn't fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's. I kind of wonder sometimes if it's a stylistic choice. The way that they like will follow up something very grim with this like inappropriate joke where like they'll be making anime sound effects and like over exaggerating the faces, because there's other ways that Yuki Yuna kind of does that, where sometimes they'll just drop the music out and go straight to silence in times where it doesn't really feel like it's having an impact. Like I've definitely like there are a few times when the original series could do that where they just yank the music out and like that that sort of suspense clicks in, but I don't think it works here, and it hardly worked before either. And that reminds me kind of the same way that it's these rug pull jokes that they kind of throw in, or vice versa when they're in joke mode and then they just sort of like, totally U-turn this thing and flip the car in the process. There's times where they have the characters deliberately like talk over each other, so it's like two characters are giving their lines at the same time. In this season, the introduction of Gin is exactly that, where she arrives late to class and their teacher Aki is like trying to reprimand her for it, and then so Gin is like trying to essentially talk back, and they're just literally, both characters are talking over each other at the same time, and there's no shifting in like or mastering of the volume to make it so that you can kind of hear one of them over the other and give one of them like the primary voice and one of them sort of becomes secondary. It's just, and I get it. I think what they're going for is to try to make it realistic in the sense that, the real world doesn't have mastering when two people are just talking over each other, but also people don't tend to do that in general because it just isn't good communication. Like, it's, it doesn't feel like they're deliberately having the characters talk over each other to elaborate like who this character is or like how they behave, maybe who they are in like a deeper sense. It doesn't feel like a clue to that. It just feels like a stylistic choice that's, ultimately distracting. I don't know. That's how the tone feels like to me too. It feels like some like kitschy sort of quirky thing that they're trying to do that just doesn't land. That's the only way I can rationalize it.
Yeah, it's fucked. And I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of. There was like one part where let me back this up because I was about to just stumble on my words. I like some of the characterizations of Sonoko. I like that she carries a little plush with her and gives it personality. I think it's cute, and I think it kind of fits what they want to do with her. I think that they nail stuff like that really, really well. But then the next scene, they retcon so that Togo was a shrine maiden, and whenever she did something she didn't like, she would dump water on herself. And they would sometimes play it off as a joke, but also sometimes play it off as serious. But her clothing would be like weirdly revealing when she did it. Mm-hmm. So it was like trying really hard to do everything in this one scene. And so the symbolism didn't work. Is it a joke? Is it supposed to represent something, or is it just fan service?
Right. You're taking what could have been like a cutaway gag, and essentially you're saying, no, she just does this. And it's like, I get it, but that's a little intense considering this show tries to stay grounded in other cases. Yeah, exactly. I don't know what range of realism it's trying to go for. It feels like it's stretching way too far.
Yeah, it's a lot. It does a lot, and it doesn't do anything great. And there was multiple times where they tried to add some weird comedic timing. They made Togo a like hardcore Japanese nationalist.
Uh-huh.
And you think to yourself, like, because they do a skit for kids. That's the whole shtick, right? Mm-hmm. They're doing a skit so that these kids can know how great their country is. And I thought to myself, well, this could be interesting because maybe the idea of the amnesty, or what else are they called? They have like another name.
I don't remember.
The Taisha?
I think that might be it, yeah. The
Taisha or amnesty. It's like, oh, maybe this is supposed to be like, here's how they fucking hell.
Propagandize?
How to propagandize these kids so that they can go and sacrifice their lives for the greater good. But then it turns out that, no, that's not it, because they tell Togo, what are you doing? Don't do this. And so it's this weird, like, hey, Togo's character in the first season was a differently abled girl who was good with computers and was soft-spoken and was kind of shy. But they're like, well, we don't want that anymore. We want end of Yuki Yuna Togo without having that character development, despite the fact that it's a prequel. So she's just this nationalistic, like, hardhead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's kind of like a dictator.
Yeah. And it's really weird. It's not funny. And they don't utilize it in a way that makes sense to the world that they've created.
Uh-huh. They even, again, something that they're clearly trying, but they're not nailing it. They try to do these little mini arcs with Togo as if, like, she's trying to be the leader, but Gin is the de facto leader instead. And so Togo wants to essentially imprint authority on the group, but Gin is the one who ends up leading things naturally. And so Togo's, like, trying to learn lessons from that, but at the same time, Gin gets herself killed. And then it's like, what was it all for? You know, like repeatedly there are these times where it's like, oh, Togo is learning a lesson. Oh, no, she's not, because she's doing exactly what she did before. Oh, maybe she's going to internalize something this time. No, she didn't. Oh, now Gin is dead, and now this really kind of raises eyebrows on the entire situation.
Yeah.
You know? It diminishes the emotional impact of what that was, because the plot and the emotion of what they're trying to tell you are just kind of at ends.
And you throw in the fact that there is this cult-like group that they don't trust, the show doesn't want you to trust. They're constantly seen as the bad guys. But there is nothing said about them. They're shitty, they do dumb shit. And then they receive, there's no dialogue about them being terrible. Everyone seems to accept them, and the undertones do not play off on anything. And we had a complaint about that in the first one, but there was at least one part where Fu was like, I'm gonna go beat the shit out of them. But that's gone. That's absolutely gone in this series. It doesn't make sense. And then it sucks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so then you go into the hero chapter. And the hero chapter could have been like 3 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
It really could have.
I honestly think both of these seasons could have been 3 episodes, but I digress. Continue.
No, let's talk about that. I'm not that I don't disagree with you. We've talked
Mm-hmm.
about how much nonsense is in the Washio chapter. But like what is like the big things that you think about besides the skit episode?
The skit episode is the biggest one, but just like it's so imbalanced. You know, the amount of time that they have to spend beating around the bush with the whole like Gin, you're so great kind of thing before they kill her off makes it feel like they think you're stupid. Like it's insulting because like it's like you walk into this prequel and they expect you to have seen Yuki Yuna at least, you know, a little bit. I think that's the impression I get. You know, so like if my assumption is correct there, then we all know that Gin doesn't make it because we know who Sonoko is, we know who Togo is, and Gin doesn't show up, right? Gin is dead from, you know, Yuki Yuna original onwards. So, like, we're just waiting. You and I are just waiting. We're like, all right, when is it going to happen? When does Gin die? And wouldn't you know it, they just start shoving it in your face of like everyone's counting on Gin. I wonder what's going to happen to her. Like, really? Like,
yeah, it doesn't do. It's weird because there's plenty of times where you could have dramatic foreshadowing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, but
for all the times they could have taken their foot off the pedal and just hit the brake hard, this was not one of them. And it's like, why? You know, there's unnecessary characterizations that they're including, particularly for poor Togo. You know, all of this, like, because we're starting with 11-year-olds, it just seems extremely silly in that sense too. the fact that like they, they're like, oh, we're going to do with the Yuki Yuna cast, what they sort of had to do, but we're going to do it like years earlier. It just like I can't wrap my head around it. It's like you're dealing with children who should not have like any kind of like capacity to handle this or respond to it in a sensible way. Like, this is just absurd. This is a little too far.
And it's weird because it's like, why? What is the cutoff? It opens up another like hole in this universe they've created. What's the cutoff to be a hero? Why are they having kids do it?
Yeah, it's strictly like, oh, Shinju-sama chose you. Why did Shinju-sama choose 11-year-olds? And then later choose 14-year-olds.
Right.
And pick one of them again. Like, why?
It's really weird that, like, you have things like Madoka or Evangelion, where it's like, here are the exact reasons that we are picking teenagers, right? And you're like, okay, fucked, but it makes sense, right? Like, the world builds that idea to make sense. And if it was a consistent age in Yuki Yuna, at least you could be like, oh, that makes sense, right? Like, whatever. It's a very shallow reason.
It could be ritualistic for all we care, right? Like,
right. But instead, they're like, no, they're 11 in this one, and then they wait 2 years, and they're different ones. And like, maybe it has to do with Togo, like maybe but it's not, because Fu, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and it shouldn't be a nitpicky thing. But if this was like the only little hole in their plot in the world that they created, it would be fine. But this has so much different changes and so much different like problems.
They literally hotfix their god powers. Twice in the series so far. It's it's nonsense. I don't understand why they spend this time on these like character building episodes where they're doing slice of life stuff, if the ability to change the plot at whim is something that they're going to do at you multiple times. Like, for example, okay, Togo loses her memory and then regains her memories as someone new. Why wait 2 years? Like, why 2 years? Why not just kick her right back in? Like, it doesn't make sense. You could have done this, like, first, I guess the whole logic is like, oh, well, Gin had to die, and then Yuna couldn't have known about her, but, like, you just give it a year, you give it a couple months and say, oh, they graduated now, or whatever. Like, there are so many more proximal things that you could have stepped towards this, but instead they decided to do these, like, radical changes to how the plot is meant to function.
Well, they also talk about like the bridge disaster that happened in the end of the Washio chapter, right? That killed a bunch of people. And that's mentioned in the first one, but it's like in the sequel season, Gin is like a famous hero. They're like, hey, this is Gin. We know about her. It's something we study. They even say they will study about Gin in their religious books. But it doesn't make sense because the hero system in the fucking main series is like a secret.
Yeah, and furthermore, like, who didn't have questions or have an understanding of, like, say, who came before Togo and Sonoko and Gin? Because like, if this has been happening for a while, which I assume it has to have been, then why is it that we have this enormous ceremony for when Gin dies, and yet none of the characters seem to have ever attended one of these for a different team member before? They've never seen this out of the amnesty. Like, they don't comment that, like we see the cemetery of people, right? Did the entire previous team just die, and then nobody talks about it, and everybody talks about Gin? Like, they're making these retcons, and they're just tripping over their own feet constantly. And so if they're going to take that loose approach, don't waste our time building character in these, like, long, drawn-out slice-of-life sequences.
It's a lot. Let's talk about the sequel series now.
Okay.
The hero chapter is a fucking mess of storytelling devices.
Yeah.
It's an absolute mess. It starts off with Togo not being there, like, at all. She's gone. And it's like, oh no, we forgot about her. But this whole entire plot thread is resolved by the end of the first episode. And then they restore Togo back to the universe within the second episode.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 2 episodes that are about where did Togo go? She wasn't gone at the end of the first season. Why is she gone now? Oh, she is in a place where she is taking all of human sin to protect them from hell. And the reason they don't have to fight anymore is because that's where she is. And you're like, well, that's weird, because that's not what happened at the end of season 1. But okay, sure, fine. But they go beyond the wall that she's hiding, and they find her. And then they bring her out. And it's like, oh, Shinju wrote into their memories that they forgot about her so that they wouldn't go and find her. But why? Why? It's so whack that you would start this incredibly complicated plot thread that could really go places, and just fuck it.
Yeah. It's weird too, because what this ends up doing is thrusting that responsibility onto Yuna. And then Yuna carries on that burden for the rest of the season. So then why not just start it with Yuna? Like, because why did we take this detour?
Yuna punched the shit out of, like, the big bad god character in the last season. Why not make that... Exactly. It's such a weird thread to start and cut off. And I honestly kind of wish we would have gotten a little bit more of it if they would have made it the entire... My fucking conspiratorial mind is that they were like, well, we can't not have Togo, because who would we sexualize if she's gone? Although, it's really weird. I will say this. It's insanely weird, because there's almost none of that in the sequel series. It's not greatly written, but they absolutely, like, roll back hard on what they did. And it's so wild, because if they could do that, which they could, why stop? Why do it in the first place?
Yeah.
Right?
It's odd. Like, it's still in... Like, sexualization is still a part of the hero chapter. But, as you said, it's minimized. You know...
There's no transformation scenes.
Yeah, they just flash it. Done. You know, they just change, which is great. You know, for once, they actually get to the point. Like, I think maybe they transform once at the beginning of the season, or, you know, or if not, you know, great. Like, they clearly don't do it a lot.
No, there's no weird. There's, like, one scene where, like, Yuna gets dressed by another person.
Yeah, it's amnesty, like, marriage purification thing that they're doing.
But
like,
it's not terrible. It's pretty short.
It could be worse. Well, I guess what I mean to say is, like, it seems like the way that it was, framed was more about making you think about, hey, this is a weird fucked ceremony that they're doing, and not so much about the fact that, they're like getting handsy with Yuna. Like it
right.
didn't.
It's framed better.
Yeah.
Which is wild because they frame everything wrong in the first part of the second season.
Yeah, the prequel is just no respect. Like they're making like chest-sized jokes about Togo, who is 11 in that prequel. Like constantly.
It's a lot. It's really bad. I would say that the prequel is terrible. Like I honestly can't think of a thing that happens in the I honestly think the thing that happened, the stuff that happens in the second part of the sequel part, you can find the good in it. There's I enjoyed parts of it. I'm not gonna say it's great, but I wasn't like offended by it or like mad that I watched it. But the prequel was terrible. Like the prequel is just garbage almost throughout.
Go look up Yuki Yuna Kagawa Life, and then there you watch the first season. You're done. You got your meme bit, and you can just leave.
Yep. That part's good. So in the back to the sequel series, you have Yuna who now can't tell people that she's cursed with a god, because if she does, then they get hurt. Which the show does really well, because they make it parallel to like depression.
Yeah.
And it's done in a way that's pretty damn good.
It's for once it's bearable and seems intentional and doesn't stray its course too hard. Like there's other antics and stuff that are going on that drag it down and make it worse. But like, you know, it's time to give some credit to this show. Like the segments where they just sit down with Yuna and her depression, and like you can read that, like the burden that's on her shoulders through her facial expression. Like it's good. Like if I hadn't been thrown into disarray based on everything else in the show, I would have had a strong emotional reaction to this. And I can tell because the first time in episode 3 where she just lays on the ground and cries, I wanted to feel something and I couldn't. Today I rewatched it and I did get choked up. So clearly, in a vacuum, they can do this. I have confidence that this team is able to hit these high notes that they want to hit. But when you're watching it go forward linearly, it just, I don't know.
It's weird because there was one of the parts is that they did a really good joke. It was funny and everyone was laughing, but Yuna. Mm-hmm. And you're like, there it is. That's what you need to do with this slice of life shit. Yeah. You need to make it have impact on the characters outside of just trying to get the audience to be like, to what's the word? To set them off. Like, because it's like the entire reason they put in slice of life stuff is to like make the audience let their guard down.
Yeah. Well, they did this with the original series too. In the times where it's like when all of the girls are disabled now in a different way, and they have these awkward moments where they're like, oh right, I have to accommodate you now for that, you know? And like, so what was just happy slice of lifetimes now suddenly kind of gets brought back to earth a little bit. Like, you know, again, they can do this, but just not steadily.
Right. And I honestly, like, going back to talking about things that the show did right, the Togo's wheelchair stuff was implemented so well in the first season that there were times where I'm like, why did they take her out of the wheelchair? Not because, like, I'm not trying to be like, oh, it's stupid that they made her have her use of her legs again, because I get that that's part of the plot. But when you create a character that could have been such a good representation, and it's done in a unique way that was really well written, it's like, wow, I kind of wish they kept that, because it was a strength they had that they actually pulled away from themselves.
Yeah.
They wrote a way for the power to work. They made it good. They made it really cool, and they made it a really interesting part of her character and how people talked and treated her. And they made it a very good story. And then they get rid of it. And in this season, it's like, well, it still kind of sucks. And Togo's still nationalist. They brought that joke back.
Yeah. Of all the things that, for whatever reason, she, like, reawakens out of her memory loss is that. Right. Which, by the way, sidebar, I'm gonna bitch about this a little bit. Why is it that they have, like, this nationalism thing going on? Why is that even a concept when, as far as I know, they're in a hell bubble? Like, maybe... Right. I don't know if you have an answer on this. Is there, like, the rest of the world that they can access? And then, like, this place is just, like, there's a portal, and this is, like, the, you know, Kagawa is where the window to that is? Or is it literally just that, like, the world doesn't exist beyond a certain extent?
So, from what I've gathered, based on the very limited understanding, and you know what? If someone in the comments reads this, and they're like, you guys fucked up, here's what it actually is, please, let me know. We
need your help. They're still making Yuki Yuna.
And we still gotta watch it. And so I don't know, because I do remember at the end of the sequel series, they specifically say, now that we don't have Shinju's blessing, we have limited resources, which implies to me that they're separated from the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
They might be separated from the rest of the world, but the rest of the world still exists. They might be the last of humanity. I don't know. But you're right. The idea of nationalism doesn't make sense when, as far as we know, this is it. This is all of humanity.
Yeah,
But
there's a message up in the classroom, like that you see in the first episode of the prequel series that says, "Peaceful morning, rich country, strong army." And it's like, why would they, why would they have that?
yeah,
In this world, like, it's so
and once
weird.
again, you could have done something with that. You could have played with it to make it so that the amnesty is kind of like this, like, super hard, like, overbearing government that makes kids want to sacrifice themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
Can I take that amnesty point forward and sort of link it back with what we talked about with sort of the stumbling over their own, like,
Absolutely
strengths?
not. You're not allowed to do anything.
Ah, shit.
Now go ahead.
Okay. I think that there's something emblematic in the way that these things are handled. So, like, for example, sequel season, the hero chapter, at the very least, is a little more clear with how it problematizes the amnesty. Like, it again, this happened in the original season, in which, you know, Fu sort of tries to, you know, actually go and kick ass. And it feels more like, you know, the way that the prequel season ends and the way that this one goes along, and how they interact with Aki, like, and what happens to the amnesty, where they sort of start getting dusted. Like, I get the impression that they're sending a stronger message that, yes, the amnesty is misguided, or, you know, essentially they're doing terrible things and you shouldn't feel bad for them, right? But the thing is that this stupid fucking curse and all the other magic components of this system just fuck it up. It just, everything from the differently abled characters down to how the amnesty interacts with these girls, all of it is fucked because of this stupid magic plot. It breaks all of that down into something that's just meaningless. So, like, okay, for example, they framed disability as this cruel act of God, right? Like, you have to go and fight for God, and by doing so, like, you have to push yourself to a limit, and you could walk out disabled. Like, I get, like, there is, you know, the grounded part of this, which is, you know, overwork yourself and you will be pained. But the fact that they reverse it ends up, once again, like, sort of defeating that whole point. Like, perhaps someone could, like, you know, empathize with this show or sympathize with its message about, like, you know, hey, God kind of fucked me over in the sense that I was born differently abled, but now I'm dealing with it. But the fact that they reverse it by trying hard enough really kind of throws that back in your face. By curing it, there is no normalcy in being differently abled. They're like, oh no, yeah, that does suck. Here, let's work hard and we'll get rid of that for you. Like, instead of focusing on accommodations and how you can, you know, integrate differently abled people into society, whether it's physiological or mental, instead the narrative shifts to, damn, that sucks, you should fix that. And you can fix it if you try hard enough or have a good enough support system. Like, it really bothers me. And by the way, like, you can take this piecemeal. Like, you can absolutely appreciate that there's representation of this at all. Like, I am not going to rain on anyone's parade and say, like, shame on you, like, you picked the wrong one. But, like, I hate that the ignorance of this show plays as heavy-handedly as its willingness to be progressive in these ways. It really kind of just collapses in on itself.
Yep, I absolutely agree. It's just not great.
Yeah, it's it redirects attention towards fixing people. You know, it's some autism speak shit where they're like, we should cure this, as opposed to, you know, these are people who we live with and they have a voice and they have a word in this matter, and they should be listened to, and we should integrate, you know, society in such a way where this becomes more fluid because we have that capability. That conversation, the latter one, doesn't happen in Yuki Yuna, right? It's when it does, it's short-lived. You know, say mid-season in, you know, both the original and sequel. That's where that happens, but ultimately they revert it. You know, and so therefore what ends up happening is that you end up with this like pathologizing of Yuna and her depression. You know, Yuna and her depression is seemingly like just magically imbued in her, because when she's ready to fight back, it goes away and Yuna's Yuna again. She's not a depressed teenager, and she never was. She was just straight up cursed.
Yeah, it's bad.
God, it sucks.
And it's one of those things where they could have worked on it. They really could have. They could have done something with it, and instead they tried to fit all of it in 6 episodes, and half the episodes were basically pointless anyway.
Yeah, and I guess to cap this part off, like I also wouldn't ask like all media to step forward on topics like this to have an answer to it. Like, let's say that like Yuna would get depressed from her cursed burden and then wouldn't solve it and would stay depressed. Cool. Like, you know, that's sad and upsetting, and you know, in a I'm going to make a spoilery parallel here, but in a Doki Doki Literature Club kind of way, it feels kind of shit, you know, to have just like this representation of, yeah, it's bad, sorry, this character's going to have to suffer, but it only really feels that way when there is no resolve, like when they just let that thread hang or use it for like plot suspense and then you know, set it aside. Like I'm convinced that if Yuki Yuna were written a little differently, then they could have, you know, just like season 1, the original, they could have integrated in this in a way where the cast accommodates Yuna and they learn to live a little differently and they move on with their lives like that. But no, you know, I don't get the impression that they actually care enough. You know, this stuff doesn't get unpacked. It just gets discarded. It feels like they're doing it for show, you know, and I can only assume that because of how it ends. In the mid parts, you could fool me. Like I really super want to believe that they actually care, but the way they treat it in the end, I don't know how you get to this point without kind of slipping up hard.
Yeah, I mean, they're like the end literally is Yuna is going to marry a god to sacrifice herself so that humanity can survive, and instead, the god Shinju dies, and humanity is now left to their own devices. And Yuna's fine. It as Brantley said, it's just it's a shitty climax. I will say that there's almost no action sequences in the entirety of the sequel, and I kind of dig that.
Yeah,
but I also don't know if there's no animation sequences because they didn't have the budget, because it's all CG.
Yeah, you know what, they spent their budget on those sword practice scenes with Karin.
Yeah, they literally have the Karin sword practice scene show up again. Like twice. Mm-hmm. They literally cannot get over that scene. It is I think it makes an appearance in the prequel series at one point. It might only do it during the flashback episode, but it comes in twice in the sequel series again. Mm-hmm. It's the same one. It's a flashback of Karin dancing with her swords on the beach. They just cannot get enough of that scene.
Hey, speaking of Karin, we can give some credit. Karin is a lesbian, and she has a lesbian confession. And, like, it's not the most, like, straightforward thing, but it shouldn't be. Like, she's clearly having a hard time grappling with it, and probably doesn't know what words to put to it. But she comes out to Yuna, and that's a hard-hitting part of the show. You know, it's one of those, like Yuna crying on the ground, where it could have landed if it wasn't for the context it was in. You know, if I hadn't already been beaten and broken by this show, then I would probably point to this scene and be like, hey, look, this is, you know, worth everyone's time.
Yeah. It is weird because her, like, crushes with Fu.
And they have zero chemistry to burn there. It's flat, but yeah.
It's there. It's something. It's not great, but it's something.
Right. And again, at this point, like, this feels like one of those things where maybe this means the world to you. Like, maybe Yuna's depiction of depression, maybe Karin's depiction of lesbianism is, like, that hits you in the heart, and then that's your one. Like, I'm okay with that. I don't want to take that from anybody. But the way that it sort of gets poorly built in the grand scheme, or sort of, like, doesn't get its resolution, that's where I feel like the people who should love those bits aren't actually getting the treatment they deserve. It doesn't feel like they're being watched out for.
Yep.
Yep. I'm sorry. I'm going off, but, like, I need to sneak this in here, because there's an extremely tasteless case of this.
Oh fuck! I remember this part.
In the original season, Togo tries to stab herself, to kill herself, and she's unable to do it. They parallel that in these new seasons, where there's a joke about her attempting to commit suicide by disembowelment. Like, how do you, with this same exact character, how do you do that? It feels intentional, and you wish it wasn't, but, like, what other conclusions can you draw? I get that, like, oh, she's the traditionalist Japanese character, so she's gonna do the seppuku thing, but fuck, come on, like...
Yeah, it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's all a joke, too, and it's fucked.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the people that made this show. We might have talked about them already. I don't remember if we talked too much about them in the original review.
So, I've forgotten them entirely. Now, do you want me to throw my dart?
Yeah, throw your dart. What do you think? So the three main people, without looking up, is Seiji Kishi, Takahiro. That's just all it is, and Makoto Uezu. So those are the three main. What do you think they did?
Okay, I honestly do not remember, and so, for our own comedic U-turn, I'm going to attempt to guess what they worked on that apparently I know, but that I'm not, that I'm drawing a blank on. So
we might have not talked about them. This might have
Okay.
been before we went really deep into the people that worked on these shows.
Yeah, but in any ways, I'm just gonna say the way that you got excited about it and the way this show turns out, I'm gonna say that they worked on Magical Girl Raising Project.
They did not.
Shit. Well, then who is it?
So the director, Seiji Kishi, he's a director of a lot. He's done Angel Beats.
Right. Yeah. Okay, I knew that one. You told me that one.
Assassination Classroom.
Oh God.
And he's also the director for every single anime version of Danganronpa.
Okay.
Which, to me, makes a lot of sense. Because this is the exact way we talk about Danganronpa. It has a lot of good shit with it, but it is undermined by its... And I know he didn't write it. Because I can talk about the writer later. But it feels like the same director,
Mm-hmm.
And he also did the Persona 4 the animation.
Yeah, that tracks. I can feel it.
All right, so let's go to Takahiro. Takahiro is the person who wrote Yuki Yuna and planned it. He's the planner and the scriptwriter.
Mm-hmm.
His other original creation is a Kami ga Kill.
No! I was gonna bring up a Kami ga Kill in this review! I was like, Brantley, you should mention it as one of those that has like a weird tonal thing going on where it wants to be way grimdark and also like sometimes just like anime bullshit. And I was like, don't do it. Don't get the Akame ga Kill fans mad. And I held back. Oh, hit. Oh.
Well,
fuck!
now here's the whack shit, because this also comes back. This also comes back to my idea of like them wanting to really do like that tonal shift and like the slice of life, but also grimdark. He's also one of the script writers for the Yuri anime. He's not the original creator for it because it was a manga first, but he's the script writer for it, which makes perfect sense because that show is just goofy girls doing goofy shit.
Yep.
It's like...
You did tell me that part. That's right. You might have told me the Akame ga Kill thing in the past, too, when we first reviewed this. So I promise to everybody I legitimately forgot. That was a legitimate reaction. But, fuck.
And the scriptwriter, Makoto Uzo, he's worked with the director a lot. He wrote the script for he's a series composition for Agami ga Kill. He also series composed the Danganronpa anime and Konosuba.
Oh. Huh.
It's weird.
Yeah.
It tracks in my mind.
Yeah. I'm gonna say the same thing.
So yeah, whack shit about those people.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the guy that the original creator also helped. I think he made the Minato Soft, which I believe is a visual novel. Yeah, he made Minato Soft, the guy that made Yuki Yuna and Akame ga Kill. And he was one of the founders, and Minato Soft is a porn game developer. Not that you can't do both, but I'm just...
Yeah.
Just saying. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah. That's them.
Great. I love it.
So do you have any finishing thoughts for the season 2 of Yuki Yuna?
Yeah, I guess I have like odds and ends.
Let's do some odds and ends.
While we're on the topic of like who did these shows and what they're like and everything, I want to ask you something. Probably while you still have these tabs up. I want you to quickly go check what the MAL scores are for Yuki Yuna original, the prequel, and the sequel.
I do have it up. So the original Yuki Yuna as a hero, has a 7.73.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think tracks. I can see why people would really like it. I'm not the biggest fan of it.
Yeah. What I'm most concerned with is how they compare with each other.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. The Washio Sumi arc has a 7.66, so better than the original. And the hero arc has a 7.65. So both of them have higher than the original series.
Mm-hmm. I really like how the prequel is the highest rated out of all of them.
Yeah. I think people like sad, but they don't like... I don't know. I cannot see why anyone would like it better than the original series. Like, maybe it hasn't been watched as much. Sort of a Symphogear thing going on. That's
true, but like, fuck. At the very least, more people have watched the the prequel and then not the sequel, or at least have rated it on my anime list. And this is less than 15,000 people who are even bothering to cast their vote. But leave it to me to try to dick on the entire my anime list population. I don't know. Ever since we reviewed Journey of Elena, I don't think I've ever gotten over that. I'm constantly in defense mode. Okay. Before we move into sort of the talking about themes and hypotheticals, which would be the fun stuff, I just want to put my tinfoil hat on really quickly. We didn't really talk about how derivative this season can feel at times.
Yeah.
Like the prequel and the sequel. More so the sequel. The whole, Togo being, forgotten away, and then, you do a little switcheroo. We mentioned before, gee whiz, Yuna and Togo remind us a lot of Madoka and Homura. And wow, that just took another step forward in that direction.
It's a lot. It's a lot more than I thought it would be. It's the sacrifice myself to save my one friend. There's the air of mystery that's supposed to be confusing to the people watching. It's just kind of fucking all over the place. It just got way more into the Madoka style of sadness. And I remember in the original series, you said, I don't think it's that derivative of Madoka. And I would say, yeah, probably. The first one's probably not that bad. But this one was it's a lot more.
Yeah, this one feels like a page taken out of the book in one particular element of Madoka. So, I don't know. Being derivative is not a bad thing. I firmly believe that derivation is how we get some really cool stuff in creative works. But should Yuki Yuna be derivative, it's very bad at it. Because I can't pinpoint a time where it derived something and also did it better.
Right.
It feels like Yuki Yuna is copying someone else's test, but they're doing it at a weird angle. They're not doing a good job of it. They're going to get a worse score than the person they're cheating off of anyways.
Yeah. No, I would put that down as fair. It's not terrible, and I don't hate it as much as other shows we've watched. I think that there's still enough there that, if when we watched the third season, there's still an idea in my mind that it's oh, maybe they get it right this time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is the one where I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Who's to say?
Glimpse of hope. Yeah, it's the Yuki Yuna yo-yo, I think. It's just constantly be dangled by the show's decent bits. Themes.
Depression is all in your head.
Yeah.
That's the theme it wants to be.
If you're depressed, if you feel isolated, get a support system. That's it.
Or fight hard enough and kill God and remove the curse from your body.
Yeah, with a support system, you too can get superpowers, and then end it.
It's really shallow, especially considering what it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And
the performance nails it, but the plot doesn't.
Yeah, I will say I think that the voice actors are really good in this.
Oh, God,
I think that they do a lot to be to their characters. That one part that you said to look up from the sequel where
mm-hmm.
Sanako says something out of a car.
Mm-hmm.
That part's great. I love it. The voice acting is good. But the plot is not.
Yep. So how about we change that?
Okay.
It's time for hypotheticals.
Hell yeah. What's your hypothetical?
Okay, so if I just asked, hey, if you were to delete a season, which one would it be? Obviously, we would just choose the Washio Sumi chapter, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So let's say that we do delete it, but we still have to make 6 episodes for a full season. How do you do that? How do you fill in 6 more episodes, but by using the sequel series context?
I would create a prequel series that talks about the amnesty. I would make it all about how they became who they are, what their reasoning is, and why they are doing this to girls. We already get a little glimpse of that because of their teacher, who was a member of the amnesty, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, we already see that a little bit. So why not go deeper, right? Mm-hmm. Why not go further to focus on the world building of this world? And mm-hmm. you can end it with Geen dying, right? Just end it with that.
Yeah.
You can have the stuff from the prequel season, but cut out all unnecessary bits and make it about the amnesty.
I think that's solid. I like that idea. After all, like, the amnesty is one of those, like, back and forth parts of Yuki Yuna where, like, they almost do a really good job of problematizing them as, like, a religious cult. It just so happens that because the way the plot turns, there's usually some element of, they were right anyways, which mm-hmm. sucks. But when that doesn't happen, and when you are questioning their methods, and the characters actually just oppose them and challenge them, then it's interesting. Maybe some additional work on them would sort of even that out, instead of letting it be the lumpy mess that it ends up being.
Yes, I agree. I think that the weakest part of Yuki Yuna is its world and mm-hmm. how it works. But yeah.
So I would not add just like 6 episodes to the front or the back. I think I would want to like splice them in. So I'm going to try to make this quick. Essentially, we add in 1 episode on what Sonoko's been doing right after her recovery, so that way we sort of smooth her into the roster a little bit better. And then we sting with the fact that Togo is missing, right? So she's getting back into it, but then we're getting these traces of like there's someone missing here. Then we have the normal Togo stuff. And so we have an episode that's dedicated to searching that out more thoroughly. And so now, like, what episode 1 was kind of gets kicked down to, like, episode 3 or 4. Episode 1 and its solution, right? Those get moved down. Then we get Togo back. We have an episode that builds up Fu and Karin's rapport with each other. Yuna is warming up to Fu again before the depressive onset and the accident, and we give Togo some time to start speculating, because she's like our team researcher, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to sneak in an experimental episode where we do kind of what you recommended, essentially spend an episode with the amnesty. So I want to actually see how Yuna's parents react to the clandestine marriage news. The whole, like, you have to get married to Shinju-sama, do you approve of this as the parents of, Yuna and all that junk. And I think then just have, like, a large chunk of that episode be Yuna doing nothing, and just processing for that amount of time, and just be, like, that hardcore pace breaker, that the show seems to not want to commit to too often. Then we have an episode recapping what Aki's been up to, Togo's teacher. And so sort of before the show can end, we codify how we're supposed to feel about the amnesty. because clearly she's not super into it, but she kind of goes along with it because she doesn't have a better, idea, and she at least wants to keep close to the girls. So let's get in there. Let's understand that. Again, it's kind of what you talked about. Like, give the amnesty something more structured and something we can actually like investigate or relate to. And then finally an episode of epilogue, which better visualizes what even the hell happened when Shinju Sama sacrificed itself. Get Yuna some therapy, and then tease whatever the third season's gonna do, instead of just letting it drop off a cliff.
Yeah, I do wonder if they don't know if they're getting, like, obviously they probably don't, where they're like, will we get a third season? Who knows? Because it kind of seems like that's how it felt with this entire second season. It's like, oh shit, we got more to talk about, but what do we do?
Uh-huh. I wonder if that's why this prequel and sequel are so clumsy to begin with. Because, like, Yuki Yuna had an ending, and they had to undo it, right?
Right.
This is a weird case where normally I would normally say, don't expect you'll get the sequel. But here, it almost feels like that damages what they create.
Yeah. I agree. They wrapped it up in too tight of a bow without leaving anything open, so they had to create new problems.
And clearly, Yuki Yuna is popular enough that they just keep on going, or they like it enough. I don't know.
Right. Fuck if I know.
Okay, one last hypothetical, okay?
Okay, all right.
So I think the hero chapter is a lame name for a season. So I want you to reuse or modify the Yuki Yuna is a noun naming convention in order to rename it.
Oh, fuck.
So this is the sequel season. How do you rename it?
Yuki Yuna is in deep shit. I think that's just how they should all have it. The series should be called Yuki Yuna, and it should be is, and then the rest of it talks about the series. So the prequel series is Yuki Yuna is not in this one.
Yuki Yuna isn't here. You know what? Here's the boring answer. You just do Yuki Yuna is a hero, but you add a second exclamation mark to it. it's a double exclamation point. It's working,
Or you can do the Eva rebuild movies and just put parentheses in between it. It's like Yuki Yuna is, and then parentheses not a hero, because this one's about Togo. That's another thing that this show's derivative about, I think. It's so focused on Togo, despite Yuki Yuna being the like title character.
Mm-hmm.
And when she goes to sacrifice herself for the greater good, Togo's like, no, don't do that.
Yeah,
that's just the thing.
There's just more mess. Yeah. That, or like you put emphasis on Yuki Yuna is a hero, or like Yuki Yuna is the hero. Putting more weight behind the whole like martyrdom sort of situation that's going on, like the hero complex that's happening. I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know. Fuck it.
Fuck it.
Yeah.
What's up next?
What's up next? What are we gonna watch next, Brantley?
Oh shit! I don't know. Wait,
well,
have we talked about
know.
this? Oh,
yes, we have. I know. We're going to be doing the first review of season 1 of Magica Record.
Ah, yes.
Because, so our initial idea was wait until all of Magica Record is released and do one episode on all of that. But we've seen what happens when we do multiple seasons in one video. It becomes fucking long.
Yeah.
So while we wait for the second core of Magica Record to start, we're gonna do season 1. So we're gonna watch it. We're gonna talk about it. I actually think going back, I might like it more.
Me too.
Because of how much shit I've seen since then. So we're going to do Magica Record. Apparently you have anything else to say about Yuki Yuna as a hero season 2?
No, but as a bit of trivia, was Magica Record where we sort of officially started like germinating this podcast?
It was either Magica Record or Gamers. because Gamers was the one that we watched all of during quarantine. So, but Magia Record was the first magical girl show we watched all during quarantine. So, it's one of those two, and we'll get to both of them eventually.
We're doing a Gamers episode?
Maybe.
I didn't sign on for that. But
thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed what you liked, please like, comment, subscribe. If you do like Yuki Yuna, know that this is our opinion, and I don't really think it's the worst show we've seen. It does have its good moments. I can totally see why people really enjoy the show.
If you want to know about the worst shows we've seen, go searching through our videos and find the ones with the highest view counts. Then there's a 50-50 shot that it was a show that we absolutely hated.
It's true. You can follow us on Twitter at FamiliarTerrets2. We will link it in the description. I've been a little bad at tweeting recently, but I plan on getting to it eventually. We stream every Monday at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. We've been kind of going through Deadly Premonition 2 recently, but we're going to be doing some other stuff here in the upcoming weeks. So be sure to check all that out, or don't, because we are not your dads.